Aesthetics is one of the most revealing branches of philosophy because it addresses a fundamental dimension of human life, the fact that we respond to the world not only through reasoning but also through perception, feeling, and imagination. We do not merely register information about our surroundings. We see patterns, feel atmospheres, respond to colors and shapes, become absorbed in stories, and experience emotions through music. This 12-lecture series explores this dimension in a systematic way. It traces the history of aesthetic thought from its earliest expressions in Greek philosophy to the formation of aesthetics as a discipline in the 18th century, and then into the debates of modernity and the challenges posed by new media. Although aesthetics is often associated with the arts, its scope is broader. It concerns the nature of aesthetic experience, the perception of beauty, the meaning of artistic creation, the role of imagination, the interpretation of artworks, the structure of taste, the idea of the sublime, and the cultural and technological forces that shape our sensibility. Aesthetics intersects with several branches of philosophy. It touches metaphysics when we ask whether beauty is objective or subjective, whether it belongs to the world or arises from the mind. It touches epistemology when we examine whether art can convey knowledge. It touches hermeneutics when we interpret artworks and attempt to understand their meaning. For these reasons, aesthetics can be viewed not as a specialized topic, but as a central way of examining what it means to be human. Before the word aesthetics existed, philosophers already reflected on beauty, form, and artistic expression. The term itself comes from the Greek aesthesis, which means sensory perception. Aesthetics originally concerned the way the senses receive and organize experience. This connection between sensation and meaning remains important today. Throughout this lecture, we will explore how ancient philosophers approached beauty, how later thinkers developed the idea of aesthetic experience, and how the discipline emerged in modern philosophy. The earliest extensive philosophical reflections on beauty appear in Plato. His view cannot be separated from his wider metaphysics, which distinguishes between the visible world of change and the intelligible world of unchanging forms. In dialogues such as the Symposium and the Phaedrus, Plato describes beauty as a phenomenon with a special power. It attracts the soul toward the form of beauty itself. The form, in Platonic philosophy, is a perfect and eternal pattern. Particular beautiful things imitate or participate in this form, which explains their attractiveness. In the Symposium, Plato presents the famous ladder of love. The lover begins with the beauty of a single body, then realizes that all beautiful bodies share something in common, and therefore learns to value beauty in general. From there, the lover moves to the beauty of minds, institutions, and practices, and finally to the contemplation of the form of beauty. This ascent illustrates how aesthetic attraction can lead the mind toward higher forms of understanding. Beauty for Plato is not merely pleasurable. It is connected to truth. It reveals an order beyond the senses. This idea remains influential. When people describe a landscape or a piece of music as profound, they often mean that it seems to point beyond itself. Plato believed that beauty acts as a kind of reminder of the eternal. The pleasure of beauty is therefore tied to the soul's desire for meaning. Plato's criticism of art in the Republic has often caused confusion. He argues that many artworks imitate appearances rather than truth. A painting of a bat, for example, imitates a physical object that itself imitates the form of the bat. Art is therefore twice removed from reality. His concern is that artistic images can mislead the emotions and the intellect. Yet even when he criticizes art, Plato acknowledges its power. Art affects the soul. It it shapes character. It can cultivate virtue or reinforce illusions. This recognition of artistic power is part of Plato's long-lasting influence on aesthetics. Aristotle offers a different and complementary perspective. He is less concerned with the eternal world of forms and more with the structures that belong to things themselves. For Aristotle, beauty is connected to order, proportion, and clarity. He describes beauty in terms of symmetria, the harmonious relation of parts within a whole. This principle can be seen in nature, where animals and plants often display balanced proportions. Aristotle's most influential contribution to aesthetics appears in the Poetics. There, he describes tragedy as a form of mimesis, which means representation. In Aristotle's philosophy, representation is not a passive imitation. It is an active way of presenting human action in a structured form that reveals universal patterns. A well-constructed tragedy, such as Sophocles' Oedipus Rex, shows the audience fundamental aspects of fear, pity, pride, ignorance, and recognition. Through the unfolding of the plot, the spectator experiences catharsis, a term Aristotle uses to describe a clarification or purification of emotion. The audience learns something about human life by witnessing it in concentrated form. Aristotle's emphasis on unity and coherence in plot structure remains influential in modern storytelling. Many contemporary films, novels, and plays continue to rely on the principles he identified: clear beginnings, developments and resolutions, emotionally meaningful action, and internally consistent characters. His theory shows that artworks are not just sources of pleasure, they are forms of understanding. They organize experience into patterns that reveal truth about human existence. The Greek tradition associated beauty with harmony. The Pythagoreans discovered that musical intervals follow simple numerical ratios. This suggested that beauty is rooted in an underlying mathematical order. Harmony is not an invention of the mind. It reflects patterns in nature. This idea influenced not only music, but also architecture and sculpture. The Parthenon in Athens was designed using precise ratios that create a sense of balance and stability. Classical sculptures, such as Polykleitos, developed canons of proportion to guide the creation of the human figure. During the Renaissance, thinkers like Alberti rediscovered these classical ideals and applied them to painting and architecture. The belief that beauty reflects an objective order shaped Western aesthetics for centuries. Although modern aesthetic theory has expanded beyond classical proportion, the idea that beauty arises from meaningful form remains a central theme. When people describe a building as elegant or a piece of music as harmonious, they are still drawing on concepts rooted in ancient thought. For more than 2 millennia after Plato and Aristotle, Western thought drew heavily on their ideas of beauty. Medieval thinkers such as Augustine and Aquinas described beauty in terms of order and clarity. And Renaissance artists revived classical ideas of proportion in painting, sculpture, and architecture. Yet the philosophical discipline of aesthetics did not formally exist. Beauty was discussed within metaphysics, theology, and art theory, but not as a field in its own right. This changed in the 18th century. As European culture encountered new artistic forms, from the emotional intensity of Baroque music to the emerging novel, philosophers began to recognize that human beings relate to the world through sensibility, not concepts alone. The senses, imagination, and emotions are not superficial layers added to reason. They are fundamental ways of engaging with reality. It is in this context that Alexander Gottlieb Baumgarten introduced the term aesthetics. His goal was not to create a philosophy of art in the narrow sense. He aimed to demonstrate that sensory experience has its own kind of order and perfection. Baumgarten argued that human knowledge has two forms: rational, which operates through concepts and logical clarity, and sensible, which operates through perception, imagery, and feeling. Aesthetic experience belongs to this second form. It is not inferior to rational knowledge. It is simply different, and it reveals the world in ways that abstract concepts cannot. To illustrate the point, consider a simple example. A viewer can describe Johannes Vermeer's girl with a pearl earring in conceptual terms: a half-lit face, a dark background, a bright turban, a reflective earring. But this conceptual outline does not convey the experience of seeing the painting. The soft transitions of light, the quiet atmosphere, the combination of stillness and immediacy all contribute to an impression that cannot be paraphrased. This impression is not irrational. It is a form of sensible understanding. Baumgarten therefore defined beauty as sensible perfection, not mathematical perfection, but a kind of completeness and coherence within sensory experience. The aesthetic object presents itself with unity, and the perceiver grasps this unity through feeling and imagination. This idea opened a new philosophical territory. It allowed later thinkers, especially Immanuel Kant, to ask what it means to judge something as beautiful, why such judgments feel universal even though they are rooted in sensibility, and how artworks communicate meaning. Baumgarten's achievement is foundational. He legitimized the study of perception, imagination, and feeling as serious philosophical topics. From this point on, aesthetics became an established part of philosophical inquiry. As the discipline grew, philosophers began to describe the distinctive features of aesthetic experience. Although they used different vocabularies, many converged on four central elements. Aesthetic experience requires a certain kind of attention. When people look at a painting, listen to music, or read a poem aesthetically, they slow down. They allow the object to unfold. They are receptive rather than hurried. This attentive stance is not forced. It is a quiet readiness to let the object reveal its form. The difference is clear in music. When music plays in the background, the listener does not perceive its structure. But when they begin to listen closely, melodies, harmonies, and rhythms emerge. The music becomes coherent. Attention transforms perception. This kind of attention can also occur in nature. A person might walk past a landscape many times without noticing it. On one particular day, however, they stop and see the colors, the lines of the horizon, the texture of the light. What changed was not the landscape, but the attentiveness. Aesthetic experience involves what philosophers call a disinterested attitude. The term needs clarification. Disinterested does not mean bored or unconcerned. It means that the perceiver is not trying to use the object for any practical purpose. They are attending to it for its own sake. If someone looks at a meadow and thinks about how profitable it would be to cultivate it, they are not having an aesthetic experience. If they look at the same meadow and notice the interplay of colors, the movement of the grass, the shifting light, then their attention is aesthetic. This attitude allows the perceiver to focus on form, not utility. It opens the way for the experience of beauty. Aesthetic experience always involves feeling. These feelings are not arbitrary. They arise from the structure of the object itself. A slow, descending melody often evokes melancholy. A bright rhythmic passage evokes energy. A painting with muted colors may feel contemplative. These emotional responses are not simply personal reactions. They belong to the aesthetic qualities of the object. This is why people often agree on the general mood of a piece of music or painting, even if they interpret it differently. Feeling, therefore, functions as a mode of understanding. It allows the perceiver to grasp aspects of reality that cannot be presented through rational argument. Aesthetic experience engages the imagination. A viewer does not merely see a painting, they imagine the world within it. A reader does not merely decode a story, they build a world as they read. Imagination fills gaps, explores implications, and enriches perception. Interpretation follows naturally from imagination. Artworks do not present their meaning explicitly, they suggest it. They hint, evoke, point, gesture. The viewer or reader must interpret these cues. Interpretation is therefore not an optional academic exercise, it is part of aesthetic experience itself. This interpretative dimension is what later thinkers, especially Hans-Georg Gadamer, will analyze at length. For now, it is enough to note that every aesthetic experience includes an act of meaning-making. To understand these elements more concretely, let us consider a few examples from different art forms. The opening of Franz Kafka's The Metamorphosis presents an impossible event. A man awaking as an insect in a calm, factual tone. The contrast creates tension. The reader feels unsettled. This feeling is not separate from the meaning of the story. It is part of the meaning. The aesthetic experience arises from tone, rhythm, and mood. Claude Monet's Water Lily series invites the viewer to observe subtle shifts of color and light. The paintings are not botanical studies. They are explorations of perception. Their unity emerges from the interplay of brushwork, color, and reflection. The viewer must attend patiently for the aesthetic depth to reveal itself. The opening motif of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, short, 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 long, creates immediate tension and momentum. The listener feels the music driving forward. This is not a matter of interpretation, it is a structural quality of the composition. The films of Yasujiro Ozu use restrained dialogue, careful framing, and slow pacing. Scenes unfold quietly, often focusing on everyday gestures. The viewer is invited to notice small expressions of emotion and the weight of unspoken tensions. The aesthetic experience lies in the refinement of attention. These examples show that aesthetic experience cannot be reduced to beauty alone. It involves form, feeling, interpretation, and the transformation of perception. Aesthetic experience contributes to human flourishing in several ways. Philosophers have long observed that beauty and artistic expression influence emotional and intellectual life, relationships, memory, and atmosphere. These contributions are not secondary. They are part of what makes human existence meaningful. Aesthetic experience encourages presence. When someone listens deeply to a piece of music or observes a painting with care, their attention settles. This focused awareness stands in contrast to the hurried, fragmented perception that characterizes much of modern life. Aesthetic attention allows individuals to inhabit the present moment in a fuller way. This presence can arise not only in galleries or concert halls. It can occur in ordinary environments, sunlight reflected on a wall, the sound of leaves moving in the wind, or the quiet rhythm of footsteps on a familiar street. The capacity to notice beauty in everyday settings enriches daily life. Art also gives form to emotion. It clarifies feelings that may otherwise remain vague or unarticulated. A tragedy can reveal the structure of grief. A novel can illuminate the complexity of love or jealousy. A painting can convey solitude or serenity without using words. This emotional clarity helps people understand themselves and others. Philosophers such as Schiller and more recently Martha Nussbaum have argued that the arts cultivate the emotions in ways that support ethical life. The aesthetic education of feeling encourages sensitivity, patience, and compassion. Aesthetic engagement changes how people perceive. After studying painting, colors appear differently. After learning about music, rhythms and harmonies become more noticeable. After reading literature attentively, everyday conversations can seem richer or more nuanced. John Dewey, an important thinker in 20th century aesthetics, described this as the continuity between art and experience. Aesthetic experience, he argued, is not an isolated event. It radiates outward, shaping everyday perception. Aesthetic experiences often become anchors of memory. A poem memorized in childhood, a painting seen during a meaningful journey, or a piece of music associated with a turning point in life can remain vivid for decades. These experiences shape the personal narrative through which individuals understand themselves. They also shape collective memory. Public monuments, traditional songs, national symbols, and shared stories all express communal values. They help communities remember what they find meaningful. In these ways, aesthetics intersects with both ethics and political philosophy. What a society chooses to celebrate or represent artistically reflects its ideals. A long-standing philosophical question is whether art can be said to reveal truth. The answer depends on what kind of truth we mean. Scientific truths describe how the world behaves. Historical truths record what has happened. Artistic truths reveal what it feels like to be a human, how emotions are structured, how relationships unfold, or what certain events mean in lived experience. Consider literature. A reader who encounters the inner conflicts of Dostoevsky's characters gains a kind of psychological insight. This insight is not reducible to an abstract statement. It is embedded in the narrative form. Or consider a painting by Rembrandt, where the subtle modeling of light reveals depth of character. No verbal description can capture the full meaning of such a work. These insights are not merely subjective. They are shared by viewers and readers across cultures and generations. They reflect possibilities of experience. Philosophers often describe this form of understanding as insight or disclosure. The artwork does not assert a proposition. It reveals a dimension of the human condition. The idea that art reveals truth will become especially important when we talk about Hans-Georg Gadamer in later lectures. He argued that works of art are events of understanding. They show aspects of reality that would otherwise remain unnoticed. Aesthetic experience is not confined to artworks. It permeates everyday environments. The design of a street, the layout of a room, the arrangement of a garden, the subtle rhythms of daily routines all can evoke aesthetic responses. Natural settings often generate powerful aesthetic experiences. A sunset, a forest after rain, or a shoreline at dusk can evoke calm, awe, or contemplation. The experience often occurs spontaneously. No training is required to appreciate such scenes, although sensitivity can be cultivated. Architecture and urban design play a significant role in shaping aesthetic life. A city with thoughtful design, coherent public spaces, and balanced proportions can promote a sense of harmony. Conversely, environments that are chaotic or monotonous can create discomfort. These experiences show that aesthetics influences well-being. Even small experiences can have aesthetic character. The shape of handwriting, the arrangement of books on a desk, the rhythm of a conversation, or the care taken in preparing a meal. These events may seem minor, but they reveal how deeply aesthetics is woven into ordinary life. The philosopher Yuriko Saito, writing in the late 20th century, argued that everyday aesthetics deserves the same attention as the aesthetics of fine art. Her work shows that the aesthetic dimension cannot be separated from daily practices. Aesthetic values vary across cultures, yet they also share some common features. Japanese traditions, for example, often emphasize simplicity, impermanence, and subtlety. Concepts such as wabi-sabi describe the beauty of imperfection and transience. Western classical aesthetics, by contrast, has frequently highlighted symmetry, clarity, and permanence. These differences raise important questions. Are aesthetic judgments universal or culturally shaped? Can people from different backgrounds appreciate one another's cultural traditions or artistic traditions? Do certain aesthetic qualities like balance, expressiveness, or coherence appear across cultures, even if interpreted differently? David Hume argued that taste can be educated, and that people from different backgrounds can converge in their judgments if they cultivate sensitivity and experience. Later philosophers questioned this, but the idea remains central to debates about aesthetic universality. For our purposes, it is enough to note that aesthetic experience is universal in human life, even if its expressions vary. All cultures create art, all cultures develop aesthetic sensibilities. This universality reflects something fundamental about human nature. The first lecture has traced the origins and foundations of aesthetics. We have seen that Plato linked beauty to truth and the ascent of the soul. Aristotle examined order, representation, and the emotional power of art. Baumgarten established aesthetics as the study of sensible knowledge. Aesthetic experience involves attention, feeling, imagination, and interpretation. Examples from literature, painting, music, and film show how artworks shape understanding. Aesthetics contributes to presence, emotional insight, and human flourishing. Art can reveal truths that cannot be reduced to conceptual statements. Aesthetic experience extends beyond art into everyday life and cultural practice. Aesthetics is therefore not an optional subject. It is a philosophical way of reflecting on how human beings encounter the world. It shows that perception is meaningful, that emotions can be intelligent, and that artworks illuminate aspects of existence that would otherwise remain unspoken. In the next lecture, Art and Experience, we will explore how aesthetic experience unfolds in time. We will ask, how does artwork shape the way we perceive the world? What distinguishes ordinary perception from aesthetic perception? We will see if people need training to appreciate art, or is aesthetic experience natural. And we will also look at how do philosophers like Kant and John Dewey explain the relation between art and life. So this second lecture will build directly on today's foundation and deepen our understanding of how artworks engage the senses, emotions, and imaginations.